Hello. This video will compare two distinct areas of music in order to find links between various aspects of the pieces from their respective cultures. I've chosen to analyze Australian Aboriginal didgeridoo music and South London dubstep. The strange sounds of the didgeridoo and how it is used in a type of music that is very alien really intrigued me. I thought finding connections to modern dubstep would be a very interesting way to approach the investigation, as they are such starkly different styles, coming from opposite ends of the earth and completely different time periods. The specific pieces I have chosen from the respective cultures are Richard Wally's Song with Didgeridoo and Scream's Exothermic Reaction. Over the course of this video, I will explore the links of rhythm, ornamentation, and instrumentation. Aboriginal music from Australia and its neighbouring islands is quite interesting, as it originally began its development with little external influence from Western music. This led to incredibly unique ideas, sounds, and instruments, the most famous of which is the didgeridoo. Not all Aboriginal tribes used the didgeridoo and had the same music, but nevertheless, in Western culture, the instrument became a symbol of all Australian music. Dubstep is electronic-based dance music that originated in South London around 1998. It slowly grew in popularity over the years and was rarely heard anywhere but in clubs for the first few years. The music itself can be very minimalistic, with very repetitive phrases, and it features electronic instruments. The most famous quality of the style is the use of wobble bass, a bass line that rapidly modulates in frequency. Both pieces put a lot of focus into the rhythms of the music. The didgeridoo playing evokes its own rhythms as the player modulates the sound through tonguing and fingering to create contrast in the piece. On the other hand, dubstep creates rhythms more standardly, with percussive sounds and movements in the various electronic instruments playing. What both styles share in terms of rhythm are that they both use rhythmic patterns that are significantly different from the norms in Western music. Song with Didgeridoo can be tough to analyze in a Western sense, since it is from a culture that has primarily developed outside of its influences. Still, we can feel a prominent beat in 4/4 time near the beginning of the work. After the initial introduction of three measures, we settle into a regular pattern of measures either consisting of two eighth notes followed by an accented quarter note followed by two eighth notes followed by another accented quarter note, seen in figure 1, or two eighth notes followed by a slightly accented quarter note followed by an unaccented quarter note, then an accented quarter note, seen in figure 2, which can be heard here. This creates accents on beats 2 and 4 instead of the usual Western beat pattern of accents on the first and third beats. This really works to create a driving sound in the didgeridoo, which helps to propel a piece devoid of standard melodies forward through the measures. Exothermic Reaction by Scream works similarly on the dubstep side of the spectrum. The work is again in 4/4 and has several levels of accent. The bass line at this section emphasizes the upbeats, while the hi-hat sets the beat itself. What noticeably sounds over is the whip-crack-like percussive sound, which accents beats 2 and 4, and each is preceding upbeat, similar to Song with Didgeridoo. This also works similarly in the whole of the piece, as it drives it forward to create progress in the repetitive lines. Both pieces choose not to follow the standard emphasized beats on 1 and 3 and instead have more varied beat patterns, a shared one among them being the accented second and fourth beats. Song with Didgeridoo and Exothermic Reaction also put a strong emphasis on ornamentation. While Western music usually uses ornaments just to add embellishments to a piece, these two works elevate them to being much more of a priority as they are used to progress the pieces. Since the entirety of Richard Walley's piece is nothing but didgeridoo, the extra ornaments he adds create a strong contrast to keep the piece fresh and interesting. There are several noises created by the instrument that can be heard in the piece. Most notably are the sounds starting as early as 5 seconds, which I will call the high frog sounds, the low snarl around 1 minute and 14 seconds, the panting sounds that immediately follow, and the growls around 3 minutes and 6 seconds. This example, along with all of the other ornamentations, create interesting animal-like sounds that punctuate the constant drone of the regular didgeridoo. In Scream's dubstep, ornamental additions are what create variation in the song. Dubstep, and this piece in particular, is very repetitive and often relies on the addition and subtraction of various lines to create changes in the piece, and allows them to use a small amount of thematic material to make a lot of music. A good example is the beginning, which just begins with a bass line and hi-hat for 4 measures, and then more percussive sounds enter, beginning with a sound effect for the next few measures. This electric wailing noise is followed by a whip crack sound that persists through most of the piece. The sound effect that begins the 5th measure comes back yet again to begin the next section, which I will play to demonstrate the ornamentations. Overall, the piece uses many of these motifs again over the course of the work, even ending with the same hi-hat motif seen at the beginning of the work. Both works in question not only use ornaments, but are propelled and developed by them, using these short, often repeated phrases or sounds to vary the works significantly. Finally, the two pieces use similar ideas of instrumentation. The majority of both pieces focus on a bass sound with higher, and some lower, additions used to create contrast. Although I briefly referred to it earlier, let me remind you that Song with Didgeridoo consists entirely of sounds made on a didgeridoo. Although the piece is pushed forward through the ornamentations, most of the sound comes from the basic drone of the instrument. This constant bass sound persists through the entire work, but it does vary enough to provide some rhythm and contrast. In the clip I'm about to play, the drone of the didgeridoo is constant, adding the bass that the ornaments can build off of. These variations are created through different mouth movements and airflow changes, allowing the didgeridoo's drone to stay moving. This emphasis on a fluctuating bass line is also incredibly important in dubstep. Although the wobble bass isn't nearly as prevalent in this piece as it is in many others, the bass carries the melodies through virtually the entire piece. The most notable example of the actual wavering sound can be heard in this clip, beginning with a simple bass line until the most prominent display of wobble bass is heard at 3 minutes and 39 seconds, about 14 seconds into the actual clip. The additional sounds just work to add contrast to the bass and move the work forward. In both Song with Didgeridoo and Exothermic Reaction, the majority of the pieces are centered around a bass instrument or instruments that constantly sound during the works, both of which use a wavering effect to add contrast and depth to the sound. Despite both styles of music having been developed on opposite sides of the world and in completely independent civilizations of music, both still manage to create many common links. These include non standard rhythmic patterns, important ornamentations that create progress in the piece, and instrumentation featuring wavering bass sounds. It is quite interesting how the human ear can develop to enjoy certain similar sounds in completely different cultures.